Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us at today's webinar on the 5-step guide to self-reflection for educators. I'm so excited you're all here. Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have a very exciting webinar lined up to you today with an absolutely fabulous guest. As always, as you settle in, go ahead and let us know in the chat where you're from today. Welcome, Karen. Thank you so much for being here with us. Robin, welcome. Happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you so much to all of you for taking time out of such a busy schedule you have to sit down and learn and be here with us. Welcome, everybody. From Etobicoke, I hope you're enjoying the sun we're finally having here. Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today on the 5-step guide to self-reflection for educators. I've had a sneak peek at the slides and you're all in for a treat. It's going to be fabulous. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Thursday afternoon. Finally, a bit of a sunny afternoon here in Toronto after we've had quite a rainy few days. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we're just taking a minute or two to settle in, close your doors, grab your coffee or your tea, listen to some calming music, and we'll get started right at 2 o'clock on the dot. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. For everyone who is here today in our live webinar, just a reminder that you will all absolutely receive a certificate of participation for being here live with us today. And we will get those certificates out to you by early next week. So don't worry if you don't see it today. Don't worry if you don't see it tomorrow. We will get that out to you by next week. Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Lisa, Rita, thank you for being here with us. I'm so excited to get started. As always, we're just gonna wait another minute or two. We wanna make sure everyone has time to join us. We do have a full agenda today, as always, so we will get started in exactly 1 minute so we don't waste any of our full hour together. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're just popping in, go ahead and put your name in the chat. Let us know, is this your first webinar with us? Have you been to all of our webinars? Welcome, Carmen, Michelle, thank you for joining us today. As always, everyone who is joining our live webinar, we will absolutely get you your certificate of participation. Do not worry if you don't see it today or tomorrow. We will get those out to you by next week. Welcome. Ashley, welcome to your first webinar. I'm so excited you found us. You're joining for a very exciting webinar. Welcome from Toronto. I hope you're enjoying the warmer weather we're finally having. All right, it is officially 2 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and pause our calming music there and we will get started. Welcome. For those of you who have never met me before, if this is your first webinar, my name is Maddie and I will be your host of today's webinar. Today, we're talking about the 5-step guide to self-reflection for educators. Quick reminder, something new and very exciting we are doing on all of our webinars. For everybody who attends our webinars live, you are automatically entered for a chance to win a $50 gift card for supplies, resources, books, anything that can help you at your center or in your classroom. So just keep an eye out for our show notes email. That will go out again by the end of the week or early next week. So keep an eye out for that with the recording, with the slides, and we will announce the winner of the $50 gift card in that. Keep signing up, keep joining our live webinars, and your name will keep being entered in the chance to win. As always, we do want to get started with a quick disclaimer. So for those of you who have maybe never joined our webinars before, we do just like to say that the content we're sharing today is not personalized legal or financial advice. So the idea with our webinars is that you gain some really valuable tips, tricks, and techniques and join an amazing network of early childhood professionals to learn. Though if you are looking to make any big changes at your center, we do just want to be sure that you're consulting the right people, such as a legal or a financial advisor. And we are now going to give a listen to our land acknowledgement.
Hi Mama acknowledges that our main headquarters is situated in Toronto, Ontario, on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Toronto itself is a word that originates from the Mohawk word takaranto, meaning the place in the water where the trees are standing. As participants and guests in today's webinar, we are coming together from many different places around the world. We encourage you to learn about and acknowledge the land from which you participate.
And we are now going to give a listen to our diversity and inclusion statement.
Hi Mama is committed to fostering an inclusive and welcoming environment for our employees, customers, and community. Hi Mama welcomes and celebrates individuals of all backgrounds, orientations, and identities. Our Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee aims to ensure we provide a safe environment for everyone to thrive while bringing their authentic selves to work. Our mission is to promote an inclusive workspace for all employees through education, discussion, and celebration of our differences. Embracing these differences while coming together with a common purpose is what makes our team extra special.
And as always, a few housekeeping pieces before we get started. So please know we are recording today's webinar. So if for any reason at all you do have to pop off early, do not worry. This session is being recorded and will be sent out to everyone who registered today. We are also recording with the closed captions enabled. If you do require those for today's webinar, please be sure to hit the CC tab on your side of the Zoom so you can have those on. Again, in terms of the certificate, so again, everyone who is joining us live today will receive a certificate of participation, and we will be getting those out to you by early next week. So don't worry if you don't see it today or tomorrow. We are working on getting them to everybody who is here today by early next week. And lastly, if you're having any issues at all with your Zoom, we certainly hope you don't, but if you do, we just want to be sure that you're consulting the right people, and that would be the support team at Zoom. So you can contact them at support.zoom.us. Okay, and a little bit about Hi Mama. Again, if this is your first webinar, please let us know in the chat. I love to see all the new names, and I'm so glad that you've made your way to us. If you didn't know, on top of the amazing professional development community that we have here at Hi Mama with our podcasts and our weekly webinars, we are also a childcare management app. So Hi Mama is designed to help centers simplify their daily operations and provide the highest quality early childhood experience you can, with parent communication, photo and video sharing, contactless billing, assessments, lesson planning. It's all in Hi Mama to streamline your daily operations and make your lives as easy as they can possibly be in a childcare setting. If you are interested in learning more or would like to take a tour to see if Hi Mama would support you at your center, Lena has posted a link in the chat, so you can check it out. If you do join the Hi Mama family, or maybe you already are part of the Hi Mama family, if you are part of the Hi Mama family, again, let us know in the chat. I love to see all your familiar names in there. If you do join Hi Mama, I can absolutely promise you that you will receive world-class support. I used to be on our customer success team as well, and I can say from firsthand experience, it is just a beautiful group of humans on the other side of the phone who are there to help you make this change at your center. On top of our weekly webinars, we do also have podcasts available that I highly recommend you check out. And we also release a ton of articles as well to help you with your industry learnings and insights. And lastly, if you didn't know, we are a B certified company. So what this means is that as we work with our amazing community of educators, we are actively working to make a positive impact in the early childhood education space. And finally, your host. Again, if you haven't met me before, thank you so much for joining. My name is Maddie. I'm a customer advocacy specialist here at Hi Mama. I'm also one of the early childhood educators here on the team, and I am your host of our Hi Mama Helps webinar series. Thank you so much to all of you for joining. I have a very exciting introduction for you all today. I'm so excited for you to meet my new co-host, Lena. Lena, welcome. Lena will be here with us for the next few months on all of our webinars. Lena, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you or something going on with you today?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Maddie. As Maddie mentioned, my name is Lena. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Hi Mama. The sun's out where I am as well, so I'm really excited. I hope to go outside for a little bit, take a little bit of a fresh air break, but I'm just really excited for today's webinar.
Thanks so much, Lena. We're so excited to have you here. All right. And finally, our guest of honor today, Ron Grady. Ron, welcome. Ron is an educator and also the founder of Childology. Ron, we are so excited to have you here today. Feel free to go camera on and mic on. Welcome, Ron.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today with you guys.
Our pleasure. We're so excited. How's everything going with you today, Ron?
Things are going well. You know, where I am, it's also very sunny, spring, summer like outside. So I've just
Beautiful.
spent the morning outside and feeling great and excited to be here with y'all.
So nice. Okay, Ron,
Yeah.
well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. So
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and the stage is all yours. I'm so excited.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's do that. I'll click the screen share and then move it over. Let's go. We'll play the slideshow. And all right, everything looks good. Thumbs up. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today, joining me today. I'm super excited to talk to you guys about this, the 5-step guide to self-reflection for educators. I think that reflection is something that we always think about as educators is always maybe part of our ideal, the ideal construction that we have of what we're going to be doing, right? But really, what does it look like broken down? What does it look like when we take some time to say, okay, how do we get there? And how do we give ourselves the freedom to get there and the time to get there? So we'll talk about, kind of 5 easy steps today. And what we'll do is, there we go. All right. So these are really our takeaways for today. So, I'm not going to really bury the lead here. Let's, we can talk about this right away. So first is getting your thoughts down, getting your thinking down, getting your wonderings down, really taking time to, just get it down in whatever way works for you in the moment. And of course, we'll go into more detail on each of these as we go through. Then we'll talk about deciding on a focus to guide your reflections, really what gets you excited, what gets you going. 3, we'll talk about finding time and a place that works for you. And a place that works for you, again, now. It doesn't have to be forever, but in the moment of your reflection in a given time. And then we'll talk about sharing reflections and also what we can do to use reflections as a springboard into learning more. So that's kind of where we're going today. But I always love to begin these webinars with a few orienting questions. And so feel free to answer in the chat and write them down if you're writing or anything or taking notes, however you do. But really, I want to read these aloud to you just to invite you to reflect, right? So first off, what are our goals for self-reflection? What are your goals for self-reflection? The truth is that everyone brings different goals to this. It might be to further something in your own educational practice. It might be for, you might be wondering how you can be a better co-teacher or a better administrator, right? Thinking about your goals for self-reflection really helps you set that focus and take that gaze of intentionality toward your reflective practices. The other question I really want us to think about is, how are you currently reflecting on your work? What is your current practice? Are you reflecting on your work at all? Are you not reflecting on your work at all? There's no right or wrong answer. There's no judgment in this space. We're all very busy and very dedicated to our field. So, we can be honest with ourselves. Think about what are our current practices. And then also we can think about what's going well and where might we stretch and grow? So are we able to go really in depth on a certain thing, but we'd like to grow in the frequency of reflection, or we'd like to grow in sharing our reflection? For everyone, it's going to be something entirely different. And again, that is a-okay, but start by thinking about these, and these will really ground our discussions and our considerations as we go through. So now we're going to just dive right into the 5 steps. I know we don't have a long time. So step 1 is getting your thoughts down. So I'm going to start really with my favorite one. And this one has been with me the longest throughout my teaching career, journaling or getting your thoughts down. And, I think it's important for us to know that journaling can look a lot of different ways, right? So maybe you journal on paper, maybe you use a digital medium, maybe you use the Notes app on your phone, or maybe you're using something that's embedded in an app, right? But really, getting your thoughts down in whatever way works for you is really a wonderful way to start thinking about your work, to start thinking about your practice. I know that there is lots to be said about journaling and reflecting in general, but I really hope that we can think as we go throughout the next series of slides about some ways to really integrate this habit of getting your thoughts down, wherever they may be, to get it to be part of your everyday practice. And also, as a preface, feel free to take what works and use it to tweak what doesn't work. Once I throw it away, because I think there's like a little bit of a seedling of goodness in every idea, but take what works and tweak what doesn't. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of a practical breakdown, but when it comes to getting your thoughts down, it might sound a little bit silly, but having the right journal really is the place to start. And for everyone, this is going to be different. So for example, for me right now, I'm using a 5.5 by 8 journal that has dotted pages and has some bookmarks, and it has a hardcover because it falls and gets dirt onto the lot because I teach outside, right? And so depending on your age group and the temperament of your class, and also the things that you're curious about, your journal is going to look different. So for example, you're on this page, you can kind of see this is my current journal with the dotted pages. This is me, it could be anything, but looking, it seems like I'm talking about developmentally appropriate practice principles and photo sets and whatnot. My co-teacher's journal is a soft cover version of my journal. We both like the dotted pages. There have been years where I have used a sheet of paper or a Post-it note every day and just stuck it somewhere, right? But the real important habit is getting your thoughts down, right? So with any habit, it's a good idea to make it attractive as well. So, I will say that if you're choosing something, choose something that you're going to enjoy engaging with. And again, this is so basic level, but it really, really is so important, right? Like we spend a lot of time making environments attractive for young children and setting up materials in ways that are appealing. So we also need to do it for ourselves. Get that cute journal, get the journal that's really exciting to you, get a nice pen. My favorite pen, I don't know if you can see it, is this one. I love writing with this pen, right? Make it really attractive for yourself so that you'll want to use it, that you'll want to engage it, and that feels good. You might not pick out something that is ridiculously expensive, but find something that seems to work for you. And I will also add, don't be afraid to switch it up. So I'll share a funny story that I had a really lovely intention of using my journal with other media with the children to reflect with them in the moment, which is one of my favorite things to do. But I got this really big journal that had nice thick paper that you could use watercolor on. It did not work. It was way too big, felt horrible in my hand, and kind of got in the way. And so that journal had to go after a couple of days. It just really wasn't working. And just to finish out this thought, like you might use a spiral journal with pages that you can rip out. That was really useful when I would take my reflective notes to meetings with a pedagogista in our old center, or if you want to have something to bring to a group discussion, or maybe you want to take something between places and you just want to be able to rip out pages. So, all of this is to say that what works for you may be entirely different than what works for someone else. But the important thing is that we work to get our thoughts down. All right, so let's go ahead and again, everyone has a very different style of journaling, right? And we've kind of mentioned this, but I think it's important to reiterate as well, right? Like, be honest with yourself. Some people are very long-winded journalers or will like to, get their thoughts down in sentences. That is me, for example. I love a good sentence. They come to me very quickly. That's how my brain works. But for other people, they may think in images or pictures, right? And so get a journal or get a method of taking your thoughts down that really is going to work for the way that you are authentically showing up each day. You don't have to be anyone else. You don't have to do it in a certain way. The way that you reflect on your practice is only going to be fruitful if you're doing it in a way that feels good, that feels natural, that you want to use. And again, what your journal looks like inside is totally going to vary depending on everything from your own mood to the topic that you're reflecting about to the day. There may be days where you get a couple lines down. Don't be too hard on yourself, but have something that's consistently there for you to start getting those thoughts down. Because when you get your thoughts down, it's really easy, I guess we should say, to get caught up in our days, right? But by getting your thoughts down, when you have a moment, whether that's later the same day, whether that is in 3 days, whether that's next week, you can remember, oh yes, this is a thread of my thinking, and this is where I'd like to go. And so next, I'll just take a brief moment to share a couple of old journals as well, so you can kind of see some notes that I used to have for the Pedagogista. You can see, for example, on the left side, I'm talking about what spaces do we give the children to hide, right? And in my reflective practice, especially at that time, I was deep in the classroom teaching. And so, I was wondering about how do I give the children places and spaces to hide? And for me, I wrote down I had some bullet points. I like to add little flourishes, right? You can doodle. This was on a piece of paper and I would scan it and then take it to meetings with the Pedagogista as well. You can see on the right side, I was also reflecting about the layout of the room and relating that to the children's movements throughout the space. So again, this is something that will vary for everybody. And then for my own reflection, I kind of kept it more simple on the right. This is from when I was in an art class and the children are talking and I was just writing down, scribbling down their words as fast as I could for later reflection and later sharing. So there are loads of ways that journaling can look. And so don't feel hemmed in by anyone in particular. Feel free to explore. All right. So step 2 for really starting that habit of reflection is deciding on a focus. And so once you're in the habit of getting your thoughts down, right? You have a way to get your thoughts down. You have something to hold, something to work with. It really can be helpful often to decide on a focus. And this focus can be something that you choose to examine, something that you really want to consider or reflect on over the course of a certain amount of time. And I do recommend giving yourself, especially if you're just starting out on a habit of reflection, give yourself a time period. It doesn't have to be forever. Maybe you're going to do it for a week, right? But decide on a focus for that week, for example, and really just let that guide you, let that guide your reflections. And so, I hope you can see how this is building then, right, on the first thing that we had. So let's talk about some topics of focus that you might, look at. And I can elaborate a little bit on what that means and what we're talking about here. So, everyone's curious about different things, right? You might be curious about play. You might be curious about art, literacy, relationships. You might be curious about how play is evolving generally. You might be curious about the way that literacy is evolving as it progresses toward a certain benchmark. I think it's important that as we remember our habits of self-reflection, we can remember that it really gets to be an integrated whole into whatever our goals are as educators, as a center, right? So if we have benchmarks that we need to meet, we can reflect about these, but we can also do it in a way that feels genuine and authentic. You might also be curious about the way that relationships are forming through play, right? And maybe that's something that you want to reflect on over the course of a year. And so your pattern of reflection will look different based on that focus as well, right? Okay, so I hope this is, starting to make sense. But again, I just want to emphasize it really is about what serves you. So choose a focus that gets you very, very excited, whatever it is, whatever it is. Maybe it's something that people are looking at in your center. Maybe it's social justice work. Maybe it's identity development. Maybe it's understanding deep topics with your young children, right? Like documentation, which I personally love so much. Let's, focus on your curiosity. And I will say, like, I'll share a little bit from my own practice right now when I'm reflecting on, but one thing I'm really curious about is the children's constructions of memory right now. And that's really kind of been my focus in my journaling and my reflections over the past year, and what I do as a teacher to support their memory of certain spaces and places and events within our context. And so, that's been my focus. It guides my reflections. And in my case, uh, I'm doing this over the whole year. And so it's not like I'm reflecting on it every single day, all the time. It's not the only thing I think about. But again, as you're starting out, it's helpful to have that focus to really guide you. And it'll change the way that you see your days as well, right? You'll be out with your children or be in the room engaged in activity, and suddenly you'll remember, oh, yes, this is relevant to this. And you can make that link. Um, okay, so we know our current curiosity. Think about what gets you excited. It's going to be different for everyone. And another important thing that you might consider is where you want to grow and challenge yourself, right? So very often when we're considering aspects of our pedagogy, the way that we interact with children, or the way that we are, if you're an early childhood leader in a center, maybe the way that you're working with faculty, working with staff, communicating with families, you can include in reflection an invitation to learn more, right? This gets to be something that you use to extend your knowledge. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail later, but just suffice it to say that places where you want to grow, where you want to challenge yourself, are also completely valid focuses for your reflections. And one thing I also like to do very often is to have an essential question. And this is something that is probably under so many different names in the literature and in discourse. But in one of my graduate school textbooks a few years ago, we read a book that really focused on inquiry work with young children. And it talked about defining an essential question. And I think it's important for us to do that for ourselves as those who work with children, right? Have an essential question, whatever it is. For me, again, this year, it's that memory question, and let that guide you. Maybe you write it at the top of your paper. Maybe you write it on a Post-it note over a cabinet in your room, over a changing table, depending on the context of your center, right? And it's something that you're able to reflect on, and it kind of just jogs your memory. And then again, referencing the previous bit, right? So maybe you have that Post-it note on the cabinet, and then it says, okay, like, how are the children doing X, Y, Z? Or how am I doing X, Y, Z in my practice? And then you add another Post-it note to it. And that's you getting your thoughts down, right? All based around this essential question. And then after a certain amount of time, you have, a group of reflections. And again, so these are some guiding questions that may help you to clarify a focus for reflection. So as you're thinking about it as a whole, you might ask yourself, what you're seeing currently, grounding, whatever you're reflecting on and what is happening right now. You might invite yourself to wonder more. Like, I wonder what would happen if I did this, or if this changed, or if this shifted. You also can talk about what you're noticing as well, right? And you can ask, what does this mean? What does this mean for what is next? So let's say, you might be reflecting on children's relationships, right? You could say, well, I wonder, what do I see unfolding in relationships? And maybe that's a question that you have, and then you give it some time. And then after some time, you add, okay, well, what do I wonder? I wonder how I can facilitate more collaboration, or what can I do to bring in particular children who may not have close relationships, or who need support in forming and maintaining relationships. What can I do to structure the environment, etc. And then, of course, as you make those changes, you can talk about what you notice happening. So the children are changing in the way that they interact, or I'm feeling more confident, right? Reflection is about the whole picture, about the children and about yourself. So, and then finally, what does this mean is, what does this invite me to do further? So all of that is to say, this is just, really giving yourself the tools you need to reflect well, and kind of building a scaffolding for yourself so that you don't have to spend, a really necessarily long time doing this, but that you can have constant reminders throughout your day in ways that feel accessible to you as you kind of delve in and start this habit. And of course, as we've kind of mentioned, you decide on how long and in what way you want to focus on. on a particular question, you can define a timeline for yourself and a how. So again, depending on your goal for your reflection, it's going to vary, right? So maybe I want to look at literacy over just a couple of months because we're preparing to do conferences and I really want to spend some time intentionally reflecting on literacy in my classroom. Or maybe I want to look at play over the course of a few weeks as we bring in some new materials, right? Your reflection really can serve you and it's just really this flexible tool. And so for my own work this year, it's really been a lot about supporting relationships. And, I can share a little bit about that. I'm checking our time, and it would not super, super long, but in supporting relationships this year, one thing that I would often do is kind of take some time and I ask, my question was, how will children's friendships last, endure, I guess, from one year to another? And that's sort of related to memory, but I ask a lot of questions. Reflection's one of my favorite things. And so I also had a question about relationships, right? And so for me, I chose to reflect on this kind of weekly, just a few lines for me. And I would take a journal, and these are some pictures that I would also use in my reflections as well. You can print out pictures and put them, wherever you were reflecting. You can use them just as references, right? But to see the elements of cooperation and cohesion in the group was really powerful and important for me as I sort of went through my reflective work. So I hope that that is kind of a helpful tip. And we're going to go to step number 3. And this one is huge. It's finding time and choosing a place. I feel like the thing that we are always pressed for as educators is time. How do I find time to reflect? There really isn't any time. And I wish I had like better news about time, but like there always is going to feel like there's no time. But I hope that I'm going to, in these next slides, we can kind of get a little bit of encouragement that there is time, or there are ways to layer the time that we already have to include reflection. So finding time, choosing a place is so, so, so important. And it really is, as we said, very, very difficult. And so, the truth is that there are a lot of different ways. And we're going to just touch on 4 factors that kind of influence the decision-making that we can go through about time and place. So there's processing styles, which is the way that you tend to or prefer to think through information situations. Then you also have to consider your own time constraints very practically. Like, do you have a planning time? How much planning time do you have? Their personal preferences, any variety of things from location to state of mind. Do you like to be calm? Do you prefer a little ambient noise? Do you like to be at a coffee shop? Do you want to do it at the end of the day? Do you like to go to the teacher's lounge? And then of course, again, always, we need to consider our goals for the process, right? So first off, we need to ask how we process information. And there's a couple different ways that is done. We have external processors and internal processors. So external processing really often involves talking out loud, right? It's thinking on the fly is another way to say it. It's, you enjoy saying things out loud. You enjoy having maybe a group of people that you're talking with, whether that's in person or virtually or through an online community. And it really is an essential feature for in the moment reflection and collaboration. And so, if you're someone who really likes to process externally, maybe your place and your time is during the school day somehow, when you can get your thoughts down and find a spare moment with your co-teacher or with your administrator or with a colleague, right? Like if you're an external processor, this is what you need to reflect well. And so it's important that you're just aware of it, right? Then you also might be an internal processor, and internal processors are often people who think about and reflect on things internally, that is with yourself, right? So maybe you're a person who likes to go on walks, maybe you like to journal, maybe you need some time in silence. And so, for example, I'm an internal processor, typically speaking. And so when I do my reflections, I like to take a little space, a little time, get my own thoughts down, and then I'm ready to share them with others and hear more things. So that is going to determine a lot about the time and space you reflect, because as an internal processor, For example, I don't reflect during the school day. That's not my optimal time, or at least not when I'm engaged with the children. And when I say don't reflect, of course, we're both a little bit of both of these. So we don't have to make it a strict dichotomy, but there are, there is we all have our comfort levels, and we all have higher comfort levels with certain aspects of this. So the main point is really that you find time and space. The way that you find time and space for reflection is going to vary depending on how you process. And so knowing your processing style, or at least your predominant one, is going to help you understand what's going to work for you. And for some of us, we'll have to push ourselves as well, right? Because we may not have time or the opportunity to process entirely in the way that is our preferred style. But for others, it also can let us know, right, what we need to do to open up that mental reflective space for ourselves. So, you might be an internal processor, you might be an external processor, you might like to be, having conversations, you might like to take some time to gather your thoughts. And then there's also, depending on your preferences, you might prefer to reflect what I'm calling here outside of the mix or in the mix. So outside of the mix, for example, would be like a coffee shop, right? So this is me taking a course on emergent learning in a coffee shop, right? So that I can take some time alone by myself, right? And so again, it's going to vary depending on what you like and your other commitments, your availability, the structure of your own community, right? You might also prefer to reflect in the mix, in the moment. These in the mix notes, I really love a lot because we're talking about, I'm reflecting in this instance, at least on the floor book and the way that that's working in our classroom and how we do it according to a developmental trajectory, all that kind of stuff. But then because it's in the mix, you might be able to see the children's work. So one of my children decided that she wanted to add a flower to this reflection. And in some ways, I just think that is the perfect encapsulation of what reflection is all about, right? Because at the end of the day, whether or not we are in the classroom as teachers, whether we're administrators, whether we're advocates, we are all about the children, and the central goal ultimately of our reflection is to provide a better environment for the children. And so I love in the mixed notes when their marks and their thoughts get to be part of the journal. It really is so fun. So, again, and also it's important to note too that one of the ways that, so when we think about putting together things like assessments or conference notes for us, for example, being outside of the mix can be really helpful because those reflections and the fruit of those reflections can come from a very different place where you spend time to maybe look at a broad range of things that maybe is more intermittent. But the beauty of in the mix reflection, right, is that it not only captures what's going on right in the moment, but really does help us plan for further learning and further experiences that may happen within a few hours or within a few minutes even, right? If we're reflecting and make a quick note, all of a sudden it might spark something in our brain. And then a couple hours later, after lunch, after the mood has settled or interests have shifted, for example, we can then implement that. And so it really is about both. They each has its kind of benefits and limitations, right? But they're really knowing, at least as you're getting started, what feels most natural to you, what is your ideal, and what feels good for you is so important. And this is one of the questions that I just want us to consider as well. Preferences vary, and what you prefer in a given moment or a given day or a given week or month, or to when thinking about a topic, is going to change. And in some ways, I think that as educators, we can appreciate that. We are very in touch with the sort of shifting nature of the human intentions via our work with young children. And I think we also can acknowledge it in ourselves. And, in one moment and one day, one thing may work for you, and another thing may work on another day. Don't be afraid to shift. And also, I want us to know that the idea of deepening our practice doesn't necessarily mean doing something more frequently or at a so-called higher level, right? We can have goals, sure, but we also have to recognize that our work is intense and our lives are so dynamic. Things happen, plans change, practices change, and pause and time to recharge are so important for us. And so don't, overtax yourself. but really think about what's working for you in this moment today. Give yourself that freedom and that leeway to explore that. All right. And just, I guess, as a closing for this step, really what it is, it's a time for us to play, right? When we reflect and when we are doing so meaningfully, we can kind of it's like play. And I highlighted a couple of the terms here, freely chosen and flexible frameworks, because those are part of Peter Gray's definition of play. And so, he does a lot of research on play, and Gray calls play, two of them are freely chosen and have have our own goals and flexible frameworks. And again, it's important. We can be flexible. It's okay. We can, give ourselves room. And when we do that, we really just get to enjoy it, right? Reflection can be enjoyable. It can be fun. We can play around with it. It's great. All right, so now step 4, sharing your reflections. And this is something that, very often I think that we are, it's interesting, right? Because we really do share them very often, I think, at least our reflections with the children in conferences. But, what does sharing your reflections look like? And let's say that you get into this habit of reflection and you have this journal or these Post-it notes or these papers, right? The real question is what are we going to do with all these notes? What are we going to do with all this data? My co-teacher and I were talking the other day about just some pieces of reflection, some notes and some photos. And we were just there's so many. And the truth is that there's going to be a lot of things. And there's going to be a lot of things, and this is true, in whether that's your journal, whether that's a notes app, whether that's whatever reflective space, that may not necessarily get used, right? And so, and this is so important to remember and celebrate as well. So the act of reflection is a commitment to process, right? And I want to emphasize that we will probably not be able to directly trace the value of all of the notes that we take, of all of the reflections that we do. It is almost impossible to use every bit of reflection for something that has a particular product, right? But as with young children, we invite them into the process, and we know that there's so much richness within the process, right? And so part of the yield of these reflective practices, of this habit, is a refined and a nuanced eye towards children, generally speaking, and toward the particularities of the children in your context specifically, right? It really forms your eye, forms your perspective. And it kind of also gets you excited, right? Because it helps you to see that your practice is so intricate, is so interrelated. And just again, as we do with children, we are seeking to hone a lot of dispositions toward close observation, for example, toward kindness. When we are engaging in this reflection and sharing them out with others, it really kind of helps us to get into a headspace that values inquiry, that values questioning. And so again, these are important parts of the process. And just to encourage you, you'll have a lot of things. They may not all get used in the way that you originally thought, but the process is valuable. And okay, so there's also formal and informal sharing as well, though, right? I mean, concrete stories, concrete examples, and illustrations of the process that we're undergoing can really be inspirational to others. So, a big part of our work as educators is to be a community for one another, right? So we share formally, we share informally. Maybe we have faculty meetings where we're sharing out reflections. And if you are a center director, or if you're a teacher in a center and you have regular meetings, maybe this is something that your center can start as well to encourage a habit of reflection. Maybe it's just the option to share, but really having these concrete stories, these concrete examples of what's going on in our classroom, what we're thinking about, helps to bring other people in, right? Collaboration is so huge for this field. So that really is a benefit of sharing the reflections as well. We also share, of course, through documentation and holistic portraiture of children's lives. We get a well-rounded view of children as well. Again, this is something that we've talked about a lot. I know I'm on some previous webinars on this, so I won't belabor this point, but really all of these things give us a holistic view of children, right? Like we may not take this particular piece of reflection into a conference, but it does help us to know that, okay, this is part of the child that I'm working with. This is part of the community I'm working with. This is part of my own practice that I'm working with or wrestling with as well, right? So documentation and holistic portraiture of children, but also of ourselves. And we can also develop new perspectives. So we can begin to critically appraise our own practice. And especially when you're taking an intentional gaze to your own practice and reflecting on something about the way that you are working with the children. Really what this does, whether or not you take it to a meeting with a supervisor, whether or not you put it into a blog space, whether or not you share it via an app like Hi Mama with parents, with families, it really starts to help you as an educator appraise your own practice. What's going on with me and how am I showing up each day in the center and with the children and with my colleagues. And so, finally, to close this step, think about, what's your invitation? What do you feel invited to do? And how can you invite others to engage with the reflections you share? Maybe you start sending them out as little reflections in your weekly emails to parents. Maybe you include them in a newsletter. Maybe you include them as part of your, onboarding in your PDs throughout the year or as part of your hiring process. You share reflections, right? There's so much richness in the way that we just, I guess our days are really filled with like inexhaustible richness is a phrase I love to use. And so there's so many avenues for our reflections to flow through. And then finally, our last step will be using our reflections to plan and to grow. So this is something that is, really important and kind of like, I guess it really is like the last step and really leads into the other pieces of our kind of our cycle of reflections, right? But we'll have all these notes, we'll be sharing them. And then, okay, well, what we ask ourselves then is, what does this mean? Again, kind of as we mentioned previously, what is this inviting me? Not only has it not only inviting me to share, but where is it inviting me to grow? What is it inviting me to change? What is it inviting me to learn more about? And when you have, all of these reflections, all of these notes, all of these anecdotes, all of these just, thoughts and wonderings, it's going to invite you into kind of action and really into development, right? Like there's just so much there that invites you to. You'll start to see, oh, I want to learn more about this. Or over the course of a year, if you've done a reflection over the period of a year, you might say, wow, I was really interested in relationships this year or children's memory this year. I want to do a professional development on that. I want to seek out more resources on that. I'd like to really start this conversation with my colleagues or at my center. That's what I'd like to do. So it invites you really into, okay, what can we do with this and where can we take this? And kind of just to close out, it really just clues us in, right? Reflection helps us to see things. And I know that this kind of seems related, but I really want us to kind of stick with this nuance real quick, right? Like reflection and a habit of reflection helps us to know ourselves. So it shows us how we're thinking about ourselves as educators, which is hugely important for our growth, whether that's year over year, month over month, whether we're switching between age groups or switching centers even, right? Your habit of reflection gets to come with you wherever. It really clues us into patterns in our own work, in the ways that the children are working, in just our center culture, perhaps, depending on your focus. It clues us into strengths and areas for growth as well. So where are we going? What are we doing really well? What can we share with others? How can we enrich the broader community? And also it clues us in, and everything comes back to our thoughts about education, about the field, and about the children we're working with, right? Reflection is a hugely, hugely important part of that as well. And so just as we continue our reflective journey and as we start this habit and continue and hone this habit, I hope that those 5 steps were really helpful to get you started and maybe even deepen and reinvigorate a current reflective practice that you had. And so with that, that's really the content for today. kind of short, brief, right to the point and sweet, but it was great. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop my screen share and give it back to you, Maddie.
Ron, thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. As I get my screen share back going, I hope you can take a look at the chat for a quick second. Everybody is just singing your praises for that webinar. It's fabulous. Okay, there we go. Ron, thank you so much. We do have quite a few questions for you that I'm going to have a hard time picking from this list. For anyone on here who don't have time to get to your question, please know that we are sending out Ron's information in our show notes email, Ron's website, Ron's Instagram, so you can keep the conversation going and continue to learn with Ron if we do not get to your question today. Before we get to our Q&A, Ron, take a breath, sit back, have some water. Just keep an eye on the chat.
So all right.
Everyone, we are going to go ahead. And as always, we have our questions of the day for you. So super excited to know today, how do you currently connect and share your reflections? Do you keep track of your reflections? And if so, what is your process right now? Do you connect with your coworkers? Do you connect through a social media platform? For example, Hi Mama has our Facebook Circle Time group to create networks for educators. Maybe you feel you don't have a space to share, and that's really important as well, to use a professional organization. And we'd also love to know if you're interested in learning how Hi Mama can support you in providing a community for your educators to connect, to share, to feel supported. Our last question on there, we are curious to know, do you submit your Hi Mama webinar certificate specifically to your local licensing agency for professional development hours? So what we're really looking to understand here is, can you use these certificates from our webinars for your professional development hours, whether you submit those to a local licensing agency, or if you do it like I did it when I was an educator, I had a portfolio of my certificates in case someone from licensing asked to see them, or maybe they're just for you and your own personal records. Both just as great, but we'd love to know what you do with yours. And again, of course, our big question there is if you're interested in learning how Hi Mama can support you in your reflection and in your networking. Before we jump into our Q&A with Ron, I am super excited today because we are actually doing our very first ever Hi Mama customer spotlight. I have an absolutely fabulous customer that I'm so excited to share with you all today. So drum roll, please. Our customer spotlight today is Melissa McLaughlin. Melissa is the director of Grimsby Co-op Preschool here in Ontario. Melissa is an absolutely amazing director and educator, and I'm so excited to be able to spotlight her today. Melissa let us know that they use Hi Mama at their center, of course, and she actually uses Hi Mama to document what's going on so they can go through those documentations to reflect on what is happening in their classroom, and that gives them the tools to continue to learn and grow in their classroom. If you'd like to learn more about how Melissa and her center do use Hi Mama to support their reflections, Lena will post a link in the chat so you can learn a little bit more about Hi Mama. Melissa, I'm so excited to spotlight you here today. You deserve all the well wishes for all the amazing work you do. Thank you so much for being a part of the Hi Mama family. All right, Ron, are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
All right, let me grab a couple questions that came up here. Okay, very excited. Okay, so one question that came through. So curious to know your thoughts on this. What do you think is the biggest difference between having a reflection journal and having a diary, a daily diary where you're documenting your life? Are they different? Are they not different? That's one question.
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like I'm gonna have some serious thoughts on this. Oh, my sound. But yes, I think that for me, a reflective journal is definitely okay. Yeah, a reflection journal is different because I think it has to do, at least in my opinion, and I'm open to discourse on this, but it seems like a reflective journal, it seems like it would be mostly focused on a particular aspect of your practice, right? So kind of like we mentioned, defining that focus. When you have a reflective journal, you might use it as, to focus on a particular feature of practice. You might even chunk it, right? Like I'm reflecting on relationships in this journal, for example. And then that's the journal where you write that down. Whereas a diary, both wonderful tools for getting your thoughts down and both beautiful fertile ground for reflection as well. But a diary might more be a holistic view. Now, I think it's important to mention that a diary can also clue us in, though, right? Again, to all those different pieces of our practice. It's just kind of a broader view. And so it all really depends on, what you're focusing on. I've definitely had, I will share really quickly, like, times where I've used a particular journal just to reflect on a certain thing. That, for example, it was outside time at one of my older centers when we were discussing outdoor spaces. I kind of had all my things about outdoor space in that journal in that one place. And that was really helpful for me to be able to take back and then do more extensive reflection on later. But I love both of those ideas. A diary is also wonderful. And if you have time, yeah.
Absolutely. So
great. Yeah.
If you have time, having both of them would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Why not both, right?
Amazing. Another question that came through, and this kind of connects to some questions you prompted us with at the start of your webinar, but do you have specific prompts that you ask yourself or encourage yourself to think through every time that you go into your journal?
Yeah, absolutely. So, those prompts are often defined by the focus I've chosen for the year, but honestly, like very often, yes. So, depending on the focus. So when I was looking at memory, or as I'm looking at memory right now, one of our memories was climbing. And bear with me for a minute. I work at a nature preschool, so climbing trees is really huge. And so part of me asks, well, what are the children's feelings while they're climbing, or how did they feel competent while climbing, right? So for me, that was the question I reflected on throughout my series of days and weeks, reflecting on that particular aspect of my practice. And so it really helps to guide my reflections for me, having that prompt. You might even choose something more general though, right? About like, what have I done today I'm going back to relationships so often because it's so valuable in early childhood, but what have I done today to promote relationships, or how have I supported social emotional development this week, right? Like you can go from the super concrete to the super abstract, but I do kind of tend to, have a particular prompt for me, kind of that essential question piece, right? That guides me. And then you can divide it up into sub questions depending on how detailed you want to get, or your own purposes for the reflection.
Right. So thinking of a question or two based on what you want to pull from that focus and start thinking about, you kind of have in front of you, written down, or just in your head to help guide that reflection.
Absolutely. Always having your goal in mind. Such a great way to say that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, a couple more questions we'll try and squeeze in here. Do you think reflection is best done individually, or can it be a group reflection as well?
Yeah, I think that is, I think it's so funny. I feel so hilarious saying both all the time, but as a former psych major too, learning that it's both, right? But I think that again it really is going to depend. So if you are a person who really prefers to think about what people are saying as they say them, and maybe prefers to express yourself through writing, maybe a group is wonderful for getting ideas, but maybe when you share your reflections, it might not be verbally in that way, or it might not be immediately, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is there is room for both. But there will also be contexts where you will need to, it's a great thing to share your reflections out loud. So for example, if you're talking about different practices in your center as a whole, that is a great time to have a group reflection, right? Because you might need insights from other centers, from other classrooms, from other teachers and other experiences to inform, kind of those conclusions down the line. And so we don't ever want to silo our information, right? And so while you may, so I guess the ultimate answer then I'm externally processing right now, but is really, take time to gather your thoughts on your own, but then, when it comes to group time, share those, be open, and know that they both have so many benefits, right?
Right. Absolutely. I completely see what you're saying about how those go hand in hand, because you want to focus on your own personal growth and what what you need to do for yourself, but also working in an early childhood classroom is such a team environment with your co-teachers in the room. So having that skill to be able to reflect together on maybe what's going on with a specific child, or maybe why the energy, like the flow of the classroom isn't working, is definitely would be great as a team as well. Awesome.
Right,
Thanks, Ron.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
I promise they're the last 2.
All right.
The other question that I wanted to ask you is, when you're journaling, do you find it can be challenging to be honest in your reflections? Like, is that a hurdle that you came over at the start or still throughout?
Yeah, no, that's really, really well said. I think that, yes, and I guess in my personal experience, for me, it was something that I started in my first year of teaching. And I had a wonderful mentor teacher, but was also very aware that, who really instilled in me that it's okay to be honest. It's okay to reflect on something that didn't go well. It's okay to reflect on a place where you need to grow, or even on a day that weren't your best self as a teacher, right? We're all human beings. And so being honest with yourself, I would say, is so valuable. And it can be a hurdle, but I guess I will say that if you aren't truly honest with yourself about what you're seeing, what you're struggling with, or what's challenging for you, all the reflection time, you'll be reflecting on something that really, at the end of the day, isn't real, and it won't actually help you move past it.
Right. So I guess trying to, while you're reflecting, just really engaging in trying to remove any judgment towards yourself to really get the best benefit for yourself and for the children you care for from your reflection.
Absolutely. Don't take a judgmental eye to yourself, for sure.
Do you find that your reflection has supported your well-being as an educator?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, both like when I reflect about like my own practice and the children with me, I feel much more excited. And it also, I think, gives me a feeling of efficacy as well. And that I can do this work. And I know I'm saying that. And of course, we all know that we can do the work, right? But I think it's important to remind ourselves that, wow, there's so much here. And it really is exciting. And not this that I can do it, but that I want to do it. It's really a stimulating practice. And so I think that, especially given the reality that our days are long and they're emotionally intense, and we are on for many, many hours, physically, emotionally, on all the levels, that yes, it is great to have that kind of, it's a little bit of motivation, especially on a tough day, right?
Absolutely. Amazing. Well, Ron, I will let you get back on with your day, but the very last thing I'm going to ask you is, I did see a few people throughout the chat saying things like, I tried once, but I couldn't keep up with it. I tried, but it was really hard to maintain the habit. What are your kind of final words of wisdom to those of us on here who keep trying, but are just struggling to maintain the habit?
Yeah. I'm gonna end. I guess the words of my co-teacher: some children take 10 times to get something down. Some children take 1,000 times, and it's okay. It's okay. Like, we are tags. Maybe you need 4 or 5 tries. And switch it up. Be flexible. Try out new things. Don't get discouraged. You've got this. I guess that's what it is. You got this. It's okay. And
I love it.
Keep trying and be flexible.
I love it. Speak to ourselves the same way we do to all those little ones in our care.
That's right.
Ron, thank you so much. That was absolutely fabulous. It was such a pleasure having you on here. Thank you for sharing your time with us, sharing your knowledge with us. We certainly hope to work with you again. Thank you so much, Ron.
Absolutely. Thank you. Y'all have a great one.
You too. All right, everybody, before we wrap up, it is officially 3:00. Thank you so much for being here with us today. One final reminder, there will be a winner from today's webinar getting a $50 gift card so you can stock up on some supplies, some books, anything you need for your classroom or center. So please look out for that show notes email. That is where we will announce the winner. And please do sign up for next week so you can be entered for another chance to win. In terms of what's next, I'm so excited for next week's webinar. Firstly, though, you will be getting your show notes email by early next week. That will have the recording, it will have the slide deck for you, and it will have the winner of the $50 gift card. So keep an eye out for that, as well as your certificate for early next week. And I hope you can make it next Thursday, same time, same place, 2:00 Eastern time. We are having our webinar will be expert panel, the state of childcare in 2022. So I'm not sure if you saw our benchmark report that was put out. I highly recommend giving that a read if you have not. We are bringing on the authors of that benchmark report to talk about their findings and insights of childcare throughout the past year and the future outlook of childcare. So it will be a very exciting webinar. Please do be sure you can sign up now to secure your spot. And lastly, if you are not connected with us on social media yet, we have an Instagram page where we announce our upcoming webinars. We also have a Facebook Circle Time group. So just like we were talking about today, if you need a community to network, to chat, share ideas, share stories, how you're feeling, please do join our Circle Time group. You can connect with a lot of like-minded and amazing educators in there. And that is a wrap for today's webinar, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And I certainly hope that we will see you all again next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.